Hello, everyone. Good morning. Before you ever took your first breath, before anyone spoke a word over your life, God had already spoken His blessing. You were not an accident. You were not a mistake. You were not overlooked. You were born with a blessing already attached to your destiny. Before you ever faced resistance, before doubt tried to talk you out of your destiny, before life tested your faith, God had already placed His blessing on you. That means the struggle did not introduce itself first. The blessing did. Too many people think the challenges they face are proof that something is missing, that they are unqualified, or that God has somehow overlooked them. But the truth is, the very reason the struggle showed up is because there is something valuable on your life. Opposition doesn't appear where there is no purpose. Resistance is often confirmation that the blessing is real. When God created you, He didn't wait to see how you would perform before deciding whether to favor you. He blessed you intentionally, deliberately, and permanently. The blessing was not a reaction to your behavior. It was a declaration of your destiny. Long before you encountered obstacles, God already knew every challenge you would face, and He equipped you in advance. Nothing surprises Him. Nothing catches Him off guard. That means whatever you are dealing with right now did not interrupt God's plan. It is part of the journey. The blessing was designed to carry you through. Life has a way of making people believe that struggle means failure. If doors close, if progress is slow, if things don't work out the way they hope, they assume they must be doing something wrong. But struggle is not a sign of absence. It is often a sign of growth. Seeds don't struggle because they are dying. They struggle because they are pushing through soil toward the light. In the same way, the pressure you feel is not meant to crush you. It is meant to develop what God has already placed inside you. The blessing gives you an advantage that hardship cannot cancel. You may face rejection, but the blessing ensures you won't be rejected permanently. You may experience delays, but the blessing guarantees you won't be denied. You may walk through valleys, but the blessing assures you that you won't live there. Every challenge has an expiration date, but the blessing does not. It stays when emotions change, when circumstances shift, and when people walk away. Sometimes we make the mistake of letting the struggle define our identity. We start saying, I'm unlucky, I always have it hard, or nothing ever works out for me. But those words contradict what God has already spoken. You are not cursed by difficulty, you are blessed through it. The struggle is not rewriting your story, it is refining it. What God blesses may be tested, but it will never be defeated. The blessing was given first so that you would never face life empty-handed. When fear rises, the blessing gives you courage. When resources look low, the blessing attracts provision. When doors shut, the blessing opens new ones at the right time. You are not walking through life hoping something good might happen. You are walking with the assurance that God has already gone ahead of you. Understanding this changes how you respond to challenges. Instead of panicking, you trust. Instead of complaining, you stay thankful. Instead of quitting, you keep moving forward. You don't see obstacles as proof that God has abandoned you. You see them as opportunities for the blessing to reveal itself in a greater way. The struggle may be loud, but the blessing is stronger. The challenge may be visible, but the blessing is working behind the scenes. Even now, God is using what you're facing to prepare you for where you're going. Remember this truth and hold on to it firmly. You were blessed before the battle began, and because of that, the battle does not get the final word. God's blessing does. The blessing on your life is not something you have to earn, compete for, or prove yourself worthy of. It was placed on you by God long before you understood what faith was, long before you had the ability to succeed or fail. Many people live exhausted lives because they believe the blessing is at the finish line, waiting only if they perform well enough. They strive, struggle, and push themselves endlessly, thinking that one more achievement will finally make them acceptable or favored. But the truth is, the blessing is not a reward. It is a gift. You don't awaken the blessing by working harder. You awaken it by believing differently. The moment you agree with what God says about you, something shifts on the inside. You stop approaching life from a place of insecurity and begin to move from a place of confidence. Faith is not denying reality. It is aligning your heart with God's truth, even when reality looks uncertain. When you awaken the blessing, you start expecting good things, not because life is perfect, but because God is faithful. Many people miss out on what God has for them because they spend too much time trying to qualify themselves. They look at their mistakes, their weaknesses, and their past failures and conclude that they are disqualified. But God never intended for you to qualify yourself. If perfection were required, no one would ever walk in the blessing. God specializes in working through imperfect people who trust Him. Your flaws do not frighten Him. Your faith honors Him. Awakening the blessing means shifting from a mindset of lack to a mindset of abundance. Instead of waking up thinking, I don't have enough, you begin to say, God is more than enough. Instead of assuming defeat, you expect favor. This doesn't mean life becomes problem-free, but it does mean problems no longer control your peace. You understand that even when you don't see a way, God already has one prepared, one of the greatest enemies of awakening. The blessing is comparison. When you compare your journey to someone else's, you can become discouraged and distracted. You may think they are more blessed because they seem further ahead, but the blessing does not operate on a timeline you can measure. God's timing is personal and precise. What He is doing in someone else's life has nothing to do with what He is preparing in yours. When you awaken the blessing, you trust God's process instead of rushing His plan. Awakening the blessing also requires learning to receive, not just ask. Many people pray for what God has already given. They ask for peace, but peace is already available. They ask for favor, but favor is already on them. Faith doesn't beg. It believes, it doesn't doubt, it declares. When you begin to thank God for the blessing instead of pleading for it, your perspective changes. Gratitude opens your eyes to what has been there all along. This awakening often happens in quiet moments, when you choose to trust God despite uncertainty. It happens when you keep doing the right thing even when results are slow. It happens when you refuse to let disappointment harden your heart. These small decisions activate big faith. They position you to recognize opportunities that others overlook. The blessing responds to agreement. When your thoughts line up with God's promises, your life begins to reflect His goodness. You walk with confidence, not arrogance. You live with peace, not pressure. You dream again, not because you know how everything will work out, but because you trust the one who is guiding your steps. You don't earn the blessing. You awaken it by believing you already have it. When you live from that truth, striving gives way to trust, fear gives way to faith, and your life begins to reflect the favor that has been yours all along. Your background may explain where you started, but it does not determine where you will finish. Many people allow their past to speak louder than God's promise. They look at how they were raised, what they lacked, the disadvantages they faced, and they quietly decide how far they can go in life. They begin to believe that success, peace, or fulfillment is for others, not for them. But God never ties His blessing to human conditions. What He places on your life is not limited by where you came from. Some people grow up with encouragement, opportunity, and support, while others grow up surrounded by struggle, limitation, or brokenness. That difference can make it easy to assume that those who had more are naturally more blessed. But the blessing of God is not an inheritance passed down by people. It is a promise given directly by Him. God does not consult your family history before deciding your future. He is not intimidated by generational patterns, financial lack, or past failures. In fact, He often chooses people from unlikely backgrounds to display the greatest measure of His favor. Your environment may have shaped your experiences, but it does not define your potential. You may not have been exposed to certain opportunities. You may not have had role models showing you what is possible. You may have been told what you could never become, but God sees beyond what you've been through and focuses on what He put within you. The blessing on your life carries the power to break cycles, rewrite narratives, and create new paths where none existed before. One of the greatest dangers is allowing labels from your past to limit your expectations. Maybe you were labeled as average, troubled, slow, or unimportant. Over time, those labels can become beliefs. You start living according to what others said instead of what God promised. But labels lose their power when they are replaced by truth. God calls you chosen, capable, and favored. His word overrides every negative label that has ever been placed on you. Your background cannot cancel your favor, but it can challenge your faith if you let it. The enemy will try to remind you of what you lacked, what went wrong, and where you failed. He wants you to focus on history instead of destiny. But faith looks forward, not backward. Faith says that God can do more in one moment of favor than years of human effort ever could. When you trust God, He brings opportunities that no resume, connection, or qualification could have secured. Many people think they need better circumstances before they can believe for more. But God often begins His greatest work in the middle of imperfect conditions. He opens doors while resources are limited. He provides while the numbers don't add up. He promotes while others doubt. That's because the blessing does not depend on circumstances. Circumstances respond to the blessing. When you understand this, you stop apologizing for where you came from. You stop feeling inferior or less qualified. You recognize that your story, with all its twists and struggles, is part of what makes your life meaningful. God doesn't waste pain. He uses it to build compass, scion, strength, and wisdom that others may never develop. Your background may not have given you advantages, but the blessing gives you favor. Favor can take you where education cannot. Favor can open doors that talent alone cannot. Favor can cause the right people to notice you at the right time. When God's favor is on you, you don't have to force outcomes. He positions you naturally. Instead of focusing on what you didn't have, start thanking God for what you do have. His presence, His promise, and His blessing. As you do, your confidence will rise, your vision will expand, and your expectations will change. You will begin to live not as someone limited by the past, but as someone empowered by God's promise. Remember this truth and carry it with you. Your background may explain your starting point, but it has no authority over your destination. God's blessing on your life is greater than where you came from, and it will take you further than you ever imagined if you trust Him fully. Hardship has a way of convincing people that something precious has been taken from them. When life hurts, when prayers seem unanswered, when doors remain closed longer than expected, it's easy to assume that the blessing has faded or disappeared. Many people quietly believe that because they have gone through pain, loss, or disappointment, they must have lost God's favor. But hardship does not have the authority to touch what God has placed on your life. The blessing remains intact, even in your hardest seasons. Pain can leave scars, but it cannot remove the blessing. Delay can test your patience, but it cannot weaken God's promise. Rejection can wound your emotions, but it cannot cancel your destiny. The blessing operates on a higher level than circumstances. It is not dependent on how smooth your journey is. It is sustained by God's faithfulness. Even when everything around you feels unstable, what God has established remains secure. Often, hardship is misunderstood as punishment, when in reality, it is preparation. God uses difficult seasons to develop depth, character, and resilience. If everything came easily, faith would never grow strong. Muscles only develop when they are stretched, and faith works the same way. The pressure you feel is not proof that God has stepped away. It is evidence that He is strengthening you for what lies ahead. There are moments when it feels like nothing is happening, like your efforts are producing no visible results. These waiting seasons can be the most challenging because they test your trust. But waiting does not mean wasted time. While you may not see progress on the surface, God is working beneath it. He is aligning people, timing, and circumstances in ways you cannot yet see. The blessing is active even when it feels quiet. Hardship often reveals what we truly believe. When things are going well, it's easy to have faith. But when life is uncertain, faith is tested. In these moments, you have a choice. You can let difficulty harden your heart, or you can let it deepen your trust. Choosing faith does not mean ignoring pain. It means believing that pain will not have the final word. Many people give up too early because they mistake resistance for rejection. They assume that because things are difficult, They must be going the wrong direction. But some of the greatest breakthroughs are preceded by the greatest pressure. Just before growth, there is often resistance. Just before victory, there is often struggle. The blessing does not remove the battle, but it guarantees that the battle will not defeat you. Even in hardship, the blessing provides strength you didn't know you had. It gives you peace that doesn't make sense. It helps you keep moving forward when logic says to quit. It reminds you that, your current season is not your final destination. God sees the full picture, even when you only see a fragment. What you go through does not define who you are. Circumstances are temporary, but the blessing is permanent. When you keep this perspective, you stop letting temporary troubles shape permanent beliefs. You understand that this season is a chapter, not the whole story. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Begin asking, what is God preparing me for? This shift in thinking changes how you walk through hardship. You become more patient, more hopeful, and more resilient. You trust that when the right moment comes, God will turn what was meant to harm you into something that advances you. Hardship did not touch the blessing on your life. It may have slowed the journey, tested your faith, or challenged your confidence, but it did not cancel God's promise. Stay faithful, stay hopeful, stay trusting. The blessing is still working, and at the right time, it will produce results that make every season of difficulty worth it. The way you speak about your life reveals what you believe about your future. Words are not just sounds, they carry direction, expectation, and faith. Many people unknowingly talk themselves out of the very blessing God has placed on them. They wake up speaking defeat, repeating worries, and declaring limitations, then wonder why they feel discouraged and powerless. But when you understand that you are blessed, your language begins to change. And when your language changes, your outlook follows. Living like someone who is blessed begins with how you think and speak, not with what you see. Faith does not wait for evidence before it speaks. It speaks because it trusts God's promise. When you declare what God says about you, even in difficult circumstances, you are not ignoring reality. You are choosing a higher truth. You are reminding your heart that God is still in control. Many people allow negative experiences to shape their words. A disappointment happens and they say, nothing ever works out for me. A delay comes and they say, I'm always behind. These statements may feel honest, but they quietly weaken faith. Over time, repeated negative words build a mindset of defeat. Living blessed requires replacing those words with declarations of faith, even when emotions don't agree. Speaking like someone who is blessed does not mean pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing hope over fear and trust over doubt. You can acknowledge challenges without surrendering your confidence. You can say, this is difficult, but God is helping me, or I don't see the solution yet, but I know God is working. These words keep faith alive while you wait. Your words also shape how you approach challenges. When you speak defeat, you face problems expecting to lose. But when you speak faith, you face challenges believing that God will make a way. This doesn't make life easier overnight, but it does make you stronger and more resilient. You stop being intimidated by obstacles because you know the blessing gives you an advantage. Living like someone who is blessed also affects your actions. When you believe God's favor is on you, you walk with confidence, not arrogance. You take steps forward instead of holding back in fear. You pray with expectation instead of doubt. You give generously instead of holding tightly. Your actions align with your faith because you trust that God will supply what you need. Gratitude plays a powerful role in living blessed. When you thank God consistently, you train your mind to recognize His goodness. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's present. Even in difficult seasons, there is always something to be thankful for: strength, protection, peace, or another opportunity to try again. Gratitude keeps your heart soft and receptive to God's word. Living blessed also means refusing to let other people's opinions define you. Criticism, misunderstanding, and rejection can tempt you to speak poorly about yourself. But when you know you are blessed, you don't let temporary opinions override eternal truth. You don't have to defend yourself or prove your worth. God's approval is enough. Over time, speaking and living with a blessed mindset changes the atmosphere around you. It brings peace into stressful situations. It brings hope into uncertain moments. It influences others who may be struggling to believe. People notice when someone carries quiet confidence rooted in faith. The blessing responds to agreement. When your words align God's promises, you position yourself to experience more of His goodness. You don't have to shout or exaggerate. Simple, consistent declarations are enough. Speak life over your future. Speak peace over your mind. Speak faith over your journey. Live like someone who knows they are blessed, not because life is easy, but because God is faithful. When your words and actions reflect that truth, you will walk forward with strength, clarity, and confidence, trusting that God is leading every step of your life. The blessing on your life is not meant to keep you comfortable. It is meant to move you forward into purpose. God did not place His favor on you simply so you could survive, endure, or barely get by. The blessing carries vision, direction, and power to help you rise above limitations and fulfill the destiny He placed inside you. When you understand this, you stop seeing yourself as someone just trying to make it through life and start seeing yourself as someone called to make an impact. The blessing empowers you to rise, even when circumstances try to hold you down. Everyone faces moments of discouragement, fear, or uncertainty. There are seasons when progress feels slow and the future feels unclear. But the blessing gives you an inner strength that refuses to quit. It reminds you that your current situation is not your final destination. You may be walking through difficulty, but you are not stuck there. God's plan is still unfolding. Rising does not always happen in dramatic leaps. Often it happens through quiet obedience, daily faithfulness, and small steps taken consistently. The blessing gives you the patience to keep going when results are not immediate. It teaches you to trust God's timing instead of rushing outcomes. Every step of obedience, even when unnoticed, is moving you closer to the fulfillment of your purpose. The blessing also empowers you to rise above fear. Fear tries to convince you to stay where it's safe and familiar. It whispers that you're not ready, not capable, or not qualified. But the blessing reminds you that God equips those He calls. You don't have to have all the answers before you take the first step. God reveals what you need along the way. When you step out in faith, His favor meets you there. Fulfilling your destiny is not about comparison. It's not about doing what others are doing or following someone else's path. The blessing is personal. God's plan for your life is unique, shaped by your gifts, experiences, and calling. When you try to imitate someone else's journey, you risk missing your own. The blessing empowers you to embrace who God created you to be and walk confidently in that identity. The blessing also equips you with resilience. Setbacks, delays, and disappointments are part of every meaningful journey, but resilience allows you to recover without losing hope. It helps you learn from mistakes without being defined by them. The blessing strengthens your heart so that when life knocks you down, you get back up with greater wisdom and determination. As you rise, the blessing works through you to impact others. Your life becomes a testimony, not of perfection, but of God's faithfulness. The way you persevere, forgive, and keep believing encourages others who are struggling. You begin to understand that your destiny is bigger than personal success. It's about influence, service, and purpose. Fulfilling destiny requires trust. There will be moments when you don't understand why things are happening the way they are. In those moments, the blessing reminds you that God sees the full picture. What feels confusing now will make sense later. Trust allows you to keep moving forward without needing all the answers. The blessing does not guarantee a life without challenges, but it does guarantee that challenges will not have the final word. God's promise is greater than your obstacles. His plan is stronger than resistance. When you stay aligned with Him, doors will open at the right time and opportunities will appear that you could not have created on your own. You were not born to live small, think small, or settle for less than God's best. The blessing empowers you to rise with confidence, walk in purpose, and fulfill the destiny placed within you. Stay faithful, stay hopeful, and keep moving forward. What God started in you, He will finish, and the blessing on your life will lead you exactly where you are meant to be.